the girls at this party is a food critic. Think of the connections. Jack's eyes lit up. A food critic. Really? Would I lie to you? Larry asked with a straight face that would have made a poker pro weep. Of course, the food critic turned out to be a girl who worked at a hot dog stand, and the Malibu party was a gathering of Larry's creditors. Jack ended up spending the night hiding in a laundry hamper to avoid a man named Big Sal, while Larry tried to sell a used gremlin to a heiress. When Jack returned at 4:00 a.m., covered in lint and smelling of dryer sheets, he found Johnny and Chrissy waiting up for him. How was the critic? Johnny asked, her arms crossed. She was very concise, Jack whispered, crawling toward his room. She said my style was chewy. Chapter 11, The Flower Power Struggle. Jana Wood was a woman of peace, but her limits were being tested at the flower shop. A new rival shop had opened across the street, Petals and Posh, and they were stealing all her best customers. They have neon lights. Jack, neon, in a flower shop. Jana ranted that evening, and the owner, Mrs. Higgins, wears a tiara. Who wears a tiara to sell carnations? Maybe she's a displaced princess, Chrissy suggested helpfully. Like in the movies. She's a shark in sequins, Jana corrected. If I don't get a big order soon, I might have to close up. Jack, feeling guilty about his Malibu laundry hamper incident, decided to help. He donned his best only suit and went to see Stanley Roper. Mr. Roper, I have an idea for the building, Jack began. A beautification project, flowers in every window. It would raise the property value, attract better tenants. Raise the property value. Stanley's ears perked up. I like that. How much? Well, Johnny could give you a wholesale price. Wholesale. I want a discount. A landlord discount. Stanley barked. Jack managed to talk Stanley into a modest order of petunias, but in typical Tripper fashion, the delivery went awry. Jack tried to carry 12 flats of flowers at once, tripped over the Roper's cat, and sent a shower of dirt and petals directly into Helen's newly shampooed hair. My hair? Stanley. I look like a chia pet, Helen screamed. It's organic, Mrs. Roper. Very trendy. Jack shouted as he fled up the stairs. Jana didn't get the big order, but she did get a loyal customer, Mrs. Roper, who found the dirt actually did wonders for her scalp. My hair has never been so bouncy. Jana, Helen beamed a week later. I'm going to recommend you to the entire garden club. Petals and Posh closed a month later. Apparently, neon lights don't go well with orchids. Chapter 12, The Reverend's Shadow. The piece of apartment 201 was shattered by a telegram. Chrissy's father, the Reverend Snow, was coming for a spiritual inspection. He's coming tomorrow, Chrissy wailed, pacing the room. He thinks I'm living in a girls' boarding house. If he sees Jack, he'll have a stroke. Or worse, he'll make me move back to the rectory. Relax, Chrissy, Jack said, trying to look holy. I'll just hide. I'll go stay with Larry for the weekend." "Stay with Larry?" Jonna laughed. "Your father would have a stroke just looking at Larry's apartment. There are posters on the ceiling that would make a sailor blush." The plan was simple. Jack would pretend to be a delivery man whenever the Reverend was around. But the Reverend arrived early, catching Jack in his bathrobe, eating cereal on the sofa. "And who is this young person?" the Reverend boomed, his voice echoing like the wrath of God. "This," Chrissy stammered, her eyes darting around. "This is Sister Jacqueline. She's a visiting postulant from the Order of the Burnt Sofa." Jack looked down at his hairy legs and then back at the Reverend. He did the only thing he could. He pulled his robe tighter and spoke in a faltering falsetto. "Bless you, Father, the weather is quite divine, isn't it?" The Reverend was suspicious, but Chrissy's frantic explanations and a lot of tea kept him at bay for a few hours. However, the charade fell apart when Stanley Roper knocked on the door. "Hey, Jack, Larry's on the phone. He says he found those special interest magazines you wanted," Stanley yelled from the hallway. The Reverend stood up, his face reddening. "Special interest? Sister Jacqueline?" Jack dropped the falsetto. "I can explain, sir. It's for my anatomy class. I'm studying to be a doctor. In the end, it was Helen Roper who saved them." She pulled the Reverend aside and whispered something about Jack being the building's security guard who had to stay in the apartment because of a recent rash of jewel thieves. The Reverend, impressed by the girl's safety, left on Sunday, convinced his daughter was being guarded by a very dedicated, if slightly feminine young man. Chapter 13, The Great Heat Wave. August in Santa Monica was usually pleasant, but 1977 was the year of the Great Heat Wave. The thermometer hit 105 degrees, and the air conditioning in apartment 201, which was basically a small fan taped to a block of ice, gave up the ghost. "I'm melting," Chrissy moaned, lying flat on the linoleum floor. "I think I'm actually becoming liquid." "I can't cook in this," Jack gasped, his apron soaked with sweat. "I tried to make gazpacho, but the tomatoes just evaporated." Jonna was busy trying to keep her flowers alive. "The roses are wilting, the lilies are drooping. I'm going to be out of business by Monday." Stanley Roper, of course, refused to fix the central cooling. "Back in my day, we didn't have air conditioning. We had fans, and we liked it." "Stanley, you had a horse and buggy back in your day," Helen shouted from the bedroom. "I'm going to stay with my mother if you don't do something. Go. It'll save me a fortune in groceries," Stanley retorted. Desperate, Jack and Larry hatched a plan to borrow a portable AC unit from a showroom Larry was consulting for. They managed to lug the massive machine up the stairs, but as they plugged it in, the ancient wiring of the building groaned. A bright blue spark shot out of the outlet, followed by a puff of smoke. Suddenly, every light in the building went out. "Jack, what did you do?" Jean screamed in the darkness.